Welcome back to the podcast. I'm here with Michael COX. How are you, Michael?
I'm very well, Connor. Are you well? Are you rested? Sufficiently well? Good.
A little bit. Getting there, but yeah. So how have you been? You've been well?
I've been well, very well. And, delighted to be on the podcast. I do listen to them, as you know, and find them a great insight into the creative process. So I'm, feel quite honoured in a sense to be involved myself, really.
Yeah, we always highlight your comments because you always write really nice, detailed feedback. Because obviously, when we read some of the comments, it's not a bad thing on other people who comment, but obviously sometimes it's just I love this or this is amazing. And it's great to know that people love it, but you always write a detailed summary of what happened, and even I find myself going, "Oh yeah, it did look like that," or something like that. Like it's nice to receive really, really nice feedback, and obviously myself and Dan have always highlighted it. And obviously, last month with Eamon's first proper podcast, we were like, "Oh, Michael's commented." Yeah, well, did you listen to last month's when we said, "Oh, Michael hasn't commented on this one yet," and then halfway through it, I got the email saying that you commented. I was like, "Stop! We have to go back."
Yeah, that was funny because I thought, oh dear. And if you noticed, I then. At the end of watching the podcast, I actually made a comment of saying, so sorry, but it's the problem with YouTube. I'm subscribed, I've got the bell notification, and I never get informed about anything. I don't know. It must be, maybe it's something to do with my computer or software. Well, I don't know.
There are different settings on the bell.
Are there?
Yeah, there's obviously the off function, but there's also one that's all, so you get notifications on everything. But I only ever upload. I don't write anything in any community tabs or anything. I sort of leave that for the social media. But I also there's also another one called personalized, and if you just click personalized but don't fill it in, it doesn't give you any notifications.
I have a feeling that I just left it for all, but anyway. So sometimes I'm a little bit behind schedule, but you seem to forgive me for that because, as you say, I do try and really think about what I say once I think part of it is to show appreciation, but also it would just be so easy to listen to something and think that was nice and just keep those thoughts to myself and not trying to big myself up by any means, but if you feel you've got an insight to share, I think it's a good thing to do because you feel then you're part of that wider creative process because it might feed into other things that writers and creators do themselves. When one offers an insight into character dynamics or something or plot related elements, you think, oh yeah. So yeah, as well as showing appreciation because I'm not a creator really. I mean, I just am a subscriber, and I do a couple of little things every so often, the First Doctor and occasionally Dr. Redivivus, but largely I'm just a subscriber to a number of channels, usually Who related things. And I just enjoy and marvel at people's creativity and just the amount of time and energy and technical know-how that people must pour into these productions. I just have admiration for it. I know it sounds like I'm fangirling, but no, I just think it's sincerely, I think, people bring a lot of pleasure and that should be acknowledged somehow. So if I go into a little bit more detail than some others, it's because it's my unique or individual way of showing appreciation by what I really got out of it.
Oh yeah, of course. I've always loved it. I remember when we there was, for example, when The Candidate from Fractured Timeline season 1 came out, somebody else had written like a 5-paragraph comment breaking down every element in absolute detail. Yeah, and I read it and I was just like, I've never because it's obviously because it's fan stuff. There's that element of sometimes you don't want to take yourself too seriously because you're not the show, but but at the same time you want to make something good. And you like for example, with for example, Crimson Hunter Volume 3 came out today, and that links into the Federation War. And I found myself editing, at the end, there's a scene that links directly with the first episode of the Dalek Federation volume that I made. Like, it was recorded nearly about 4 years ago. But
wow,
it was interesting because I had to listen to the original scene just to get kind of the context of what was being said. I wasn't trying to copy it. In fact, I do think actually I might have just because of the accuracy of what I wanted to portray, I think I just went into the project file and copied the lines over. But I added new elements to it because for a very long time, I don't know why, and I think it was just stubbornness, I didn't put footsteps in anything. Like, I was making audios from maybe about, like, more seriously from October 2018, and it wasn't until 2 years later that I actually started adding footsteps to but nobody ever noticed. There was a couple of people who went, "What's going on?" Because I can't hear anything. I don't hear any footsteps, and it was only something I really thought about later. And it was because I wasn't taking it too seriously. I was just like, "I'll make the stuff, and someone's going to be out of breath. You can hear that it's footsteps." But yeah, for the first 2 years, there was no footsteps, no like sound of sonic screwdriver being handled, none of those details that now. But because I was a bit, for me, it was all about the quantity over quality, and to an extent, obviously, we still try and aim to keep up with our schedule. But it was a case of I wanted to get them edited as soon as possible, so those things just didn't seem important to me, which I think is an error. And obviously, since I've corrected it, and I feel like when I was editing that scene from Crimson Hunter with the old recordings and adding the details that weren't previously there, like they're walking through an ashy battlefield at the beginning of the Dalek Federation volume, and now I've added sounds of them walking through sand, and you can hear like the pitter patter of the feet on the sand. You can hear the feet struggling to get through, and there's no solid ground, so you can hear the sand moving and everything. It's really much more immersive, and it's one of those things where it's a very good thing to reflect on as well. Where as well, like because I make things so far in advance, I get to sit down and listen to them with everyone else as if I'm a first-time viewer. Because like Crimson Hunter Volume 3, I was script editing that on New Year's Day this year, and then it was
really.
Yeah, it got all of it got written in December last year, and then I was script editing, obviously because Christmas happened, and then New Year's Day I was around my dad and stepmom's, and then I was just editing it, and then I had to write my episode, and then the recording process started, and I think I got it finished by May, and obviously since then I've been working on so many other things as well. But yeah, there is. It is quite the schedule.
You made I mean, in what you've just been saying, there was an important word earlier on when you were describing, the trudging through the that sort of almost like hellscape with all the sand and the ash and things. And you said like to make it more immersive, and I think that's the key to all these audio dramas across all the different series, whether it be Who Related or whether it be Time Traveller or whether it be On the Sea, whatever it happens to be. It's about that escapism where just for a moment you're just gripped by the drama and you're in it. And I think these additional elements, as you say, do help to draw a person in, because the voices and the soundtrack is not enough. There has to be a whole soundscape that creates a reality. So I mean, well done. But I mean, I think the worry is it's just all the hours that it must take to add those individual elements. I wouldn't have the skill or probably the patience, actually. So fair play to you. It's
just about, for me, when it comes to the whole editing process, it's about, I was very lucky because I knew someone who was very good at, who did a lot of those. They don't do them anymore because the copyright holder hits them on YouTube now. But it was when you'd get the Doctor Who scenes with the music isolated and you'd add the new music in.
Yes.
And there was someone I knew who could do that. And they went through for about 3 months and picked up every single RTD era sound effect.
Oh wow!
Like that's how I get the sound of the lever for the TARDIS or anything like that. And
so, how many terabytes, or are you even beyond that now with your storage facility?
I've got about 5 hard drives.
Well, that makes sense.
Well, I think the audios themselves are, like, the audio files are always quite small because just the audio file. It's when you render it out for YouTube, I call them the YouTube release video files. That's when they end up being a gigabyte or something, because you're rendering out full HD with
Right.
like the visual on it. And nowadays we've now sort of switched it up and obviously changed how the logo looks. So we now do them in Photoshop, because back in the day we used to do them in Premiere Pro, and now we just kind of, that's the thing, I wanted that rebrand to really kind of show off that we're kind of trying to make a new sort of step and everything like that.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah.
And oddly now, I seem to find that nowadays, like with fan films now, they've actually, like back in my day, I would just put up my back in my day, like 2008 and stuff like that, I was just putting up a digital camera on a tripod, running in front of it, and I'd have like one of the the toy Tenant console in front of the webcam, and I'd walk backwards and pretend.
Yes.
I've still got those, but they'll never. I'm like 12 I'm 12 in my school blazer, trying to look like David Tennant. I'm trying to match that, and then yeah, and then I took a break for a bit, and I tried to do that live action. And I think I released that as a lockdown special back in 2020. And then I came back with the audios in 2016, just every few months, whenever I felt like kind of going back to it. But then, because the whole reason why I did that was because I was making all the other visual series I do, but that goes through so many people that I was just like, I'm getting bored of waiting for you to approve something that I want to do. I know it sounds stubborn to say, but I thought I just want to make something and just make it, and not have to worry about getting notes back about it and stuff like that. So I just started making the audios every now and again whenever I felt like I just wanted to make something, and then it just turned into full time.
Goodness, yeah. And I must admit, the podcasts are very. I must admit, as I say, the podcasts can be a little bit challenging, because they're thinking, because we don't have the visual element. It's hard to listen for a long time. So sometimes I have to listen to, say, half an hour or even 45 minutes, and then go and do something else, and then come back. No offense intended. Just simply because I don't want my attention to wander, halfway through something, which I know I am going to enjoy when I've heard the whole thing. Yeah. If that makes any sort of sense.
Well, we have kind of thought about now, because we're thinking about, I mean, I don't know if you know this, I haven't really advertised all that much, but I've started a Patreon for Overton Audios. And it's not it's not something that I'm forcing people to do. I'm still going to make stuff regardless. It's just because of how much time it takes and everything. It's just one of those things where it's like, been nice to, be able to, like, at the moment I've got about six people, and it's about, the minimum is £2.50. I don't ask for anything more. And it's just a case of, it's not like some people have signed up to it because they go, well, no, you make so much stuff. £2.50 is the least that can be done for the amount of time that you've spent so far, and will continue to spend on it. And it's obviously appreciated, and it's nice to have some sort of return on it. But nonetheless, if I didn't make the Patreon, I wasn't going to slow down either. But also, what was I going to say? I know that Dan's made a Patreon recently because the energy bill's going up, and him having to do this mammoth episode, he's like, this computer has been draining my energy because it's on all the time rendering, because he's having to do like 3D spaces. He's just going all out on it. And and he and I don't know how they did it, but like, because I know that what kind of inspired me to do it was Luke had one for about £1.30 a month. But I couldn't get mine any lower than £2.50. I was trying for ages and trying to like make it work, but they said no, it has to be £2.50. I'm like, right, okay. Then Dan's done it at £1.50. I'm like, how's everyone done this? I don't know. Because I wanted to go with the original £1.50, because that kind of thing of, it's cheap and hopefully a little bit appealing, but and but obviously it's kind of awkward, because with the podcast we've been thinking about, the podcast is the only thing we can really monetize on the channel, because you can't monetize Doctor Who and you can't make money off Doctor Who. So all the money that I'd get from the Patreon would have to go into the original project, which is obviously something I'm going to abide to. But we've also been thinking about stopping releasing the podcasts on YouTube and going for Spotify instead, or something like that, so that you can walk and listen on the go, or something like that. Because I obviously have the SoundCloud for it, so you can listen to SoundCloud versions. But I might also I'm now just rambling to myself. I've been thinking about doing time codes for certain sections so that you can listen to the opening and hear what's coming up and go, oh, actually, I want to listen to, let's say I want to listen to Chelsea talk about Crimson Hunter. Then, you know, you can just go into the description, or it might, I think it creates chapters. I don't know how it all works, but you know, you can go in and find it easily. So therefore the podcast doesn't become something you have to sit through and wait for.
It's
there and optional. Like, you know, if you want to listen to people read, if you want to listen to us read comments, you can. You don't have to wait for like 15 minutes or so whilst we read them all. Or, you know, if you want to listen to something specifically first, then you can. You know, I'm thinking about maybe doing time codes or the chapters option you have, so that it's just easily accessible for people. So like, for example, for yourself, if you want to do like spaced out listening, and let's say you wanted to listen to this podcast and you know, go, oh yeah, I want to listen to my bit first, you can just scroll straight to it instead of having to wait for, because I think there's about 3 sections in this month's podcast, so it's going to be a bit of a longer one.
Is there?
Yeah, because we've got Sherlock Holmes, then we've got the Transcending Time, and then we've got First Doctor.
Oh goodness, right.
Yeah, got to edit that. Got to edit all this by the second.
Right.
Like, I always have this thing. Like, for example, with the Crimson Hunter box that came out today, we feature a returning character who's never. He's one of a character who's been in the other forms of media before, from our fan universe, but hasn't appeared on Overton Audios before. And we're going to slowly build to him having his own volume, because he joined very late, and I'm like, we don't have a free space for another 2 years. Right. So we found places for him to appear that can cover that. Same with the Torchwood stuff, because we go to the Torchwood archive in volume 3 of Crimson Hunter, and you'll see that from the cover that James Sutton as Fraser is on it. And those are the little things I try and put in to kind of go, so it doesn't feel like, you know, because Rebirth came out in June and the next volume isn't due till March. I just try and, you know, include characters to try and, you know, not so people don't forget, but also to keep everyone sweet whilst we prepare the main event.
Yes,
but like,
that's
how it was. That's how it was for yourself when we did Transcendence. It was a lovely cameo scene, and it was a nice surprise for most people. And like, I hadn't told certain people who were even in it, so when they heard it, they're like, "What?" and just very, very, very shocked and overjoyed with it. And then obviously we've done, you know, Federation War, but at this stage, he's my favorite Doctor, but I've met him, I think, now 2 or 3 times. I'm like, we can't. Which is why when it came to doing the Transcending Time stuff, I was like, oh, I've got to do Heartland. I'm like, I've already done it twice. So that's why I decided to go with 13 in the end, because I'd found Mr. Do you know Mr. TARDIS Reviews?
I think I know the name. I might have looked at some of the material.
He does more live streams now and talks about the show, but he did make a fan audio with a woman called Wendy Abrahams, who plays the 13th Doctor. And I found her on Facebook, just like yourself, a message going, "Hi, so I've heard you in this, and I make audios too. Would you be able to do it, please?" And it was just a one-off. It was meant to be a one-off, but now, I mean, it's not going to happen now, sadly. We had written a volume for the 13th Doctor to come out this month.
Really?
Yeah, but time. Like, it was so last minute. I added it going, yeah, we can do it in time for the centenary. And then they didn't announce the bloody release date until like a few days ago. So I was like, well, I can't time it. So we're going to have it come out next year at some point. It gives me a solid, I think, 10 months now, roughly, you know, 5 to 10 months to get it ready now for everyone to record. But yeah, and that's this thing I've also worked with, because the next Transcending Time we're doing, do you know Wink Taylor?
That does ring a bell.
He was in Dark Days with that Rory made. He plays the 7th Doctor, and he can also do the 5th Doctor.
Oh, right.
So we're doing a Transcending Time with the 7th Doctor, and also there's an episode of Divergent. So we're doing that, also has him in. And yeah, like, I'm basically, the way my friends describe it as, you know, the MCU with Thanos and the gauntlet with all the stones in.
Thanos.
Yeah, like the snap and everything, like, you know, from Avengers, Infinity War and stuff like that.
I'm vaguely familiar with it.
Yeah, the people say that I'm like Thanos collecting all the voice actors for every Doctor to do one massive story, because obviously I'm now having to think about the 60th. And
yes,
I'm thinking, well, what can we do for that? How big can we make? Because I'm thinking it was originally just going to be the fan Doctors, and I thought, well, no, I know Michael, and I now know Wendy, and I now know Wing Taylor, who can do 5th, 5, and 7, and then I know Chris Walker Thompson, who can do the 2nd Doctor and the 12th Doctor, and I'm like,
yeah,
how big should the story be? Like, should I get cameos? But then, you know, I don't, you know what I mean? I want everyone to kind of like that's the problem, is trying to find a decent story that will give everyone the airtime they deserve. Because I don't want it just to be a cameo, just to go, oh look, they're here. I want it to be something where every character or every iteration of the Doctor who might appear in it has a form of character growth in it.
right.
Like, even if, you know, because of the timeline, they may not remember it, I want it to be something that is interesting to play off for people. Like, you know, like maybe have like, you know, like First Doctor meeting all of these Doctors being like, oh, right, okay. How old are you? Oh, I'm like, because Cravat is 55,000 years old.
Oh, wow.
I can imagine the First Doctor being like, no, no, we're not. I'm not intending on living that long. I can see him being quite grumpy about me. But you know what I mean? It's just coming together with all those plot points and everything. I'm trying to figure it out. But what I want to
need a spreadsheet almost,
yeah,
or
I do.
some sort of diagram thing.
Well, that's it, because we've been working on another 60th special that's being made by Eamon and Aidan, because they have started their own fan universe together. And
Yes.
Mastermind Volume 2 leads it basically. Mastermind Volume 2 and a couple of other volumes throughout next year from us are setups for that big 60th as well.
Oh, right.
And tie-ins to the overall story, because it's a multiversal thing where something goes horribly wrong. You know, the story's like, you know, the basics, but then, you know, you put the characters in and it makes that story as a result. Yeah.
In spite of everything, I still have that idea in the back of my mind that eventually I'd be able to do something with a little bit more of a professional look to it for Dr. Redivivus, because that is my Doctor. That's much more me. Whereas the Hartnell Doctor, I'm trying to recreate the First Doctor. That's why, in a sense, it's Dr. Redivivus. It's the First Doctor reborn, because sadly, William Hartnell is dead and no longer with us and can't reprise his role. And in a sense, okay, David Bradley has done a great job. And, you know, I loved him in An Adventure in Space and Time.
God, I remember watching that, and I was honestly, it was the first, I know it sounds silly, but it was the first program I genuinely cried at, like the fireplace scene. Like, he loved the role so much. I feel emotional now. Move on.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
No, it's just I just loved the passion he had. He became, you know, he like went through that documentary. It shows how he became he was basically the grumpy old man that we know as the First Doctor. And through the element of Doctor Who, it encouraged him to have that mischievous sort of the childishness and the fun play of it. Like, you know, that scene. I know obviously it's probably mostly dramatized, but that scene when he's in the park and all the children are there and spot him. I love it.
I knew you were going to say that. Yeah, because I think that's a key scene that he really it transforms him, as you say, from a grumpy old man into a more playful, humane sort of person. But I think the response of the audience really, when he encounters them in the flesh, transforms his appreciation and understanding and his commitment to the role.
Yeah.
Because he realizes, as I think a lot of the Doctors do, and they say it when they go to these conventions, that it touches people's lives.
Yeah.
And so
they don't really see them. They don't actually really see, they don't see William Hartnell. They see the Doctor.
Exactly.
And that's what matters, is you become I suppose the really good quote from Catherine Tate said during David Tennant's NTA Special Recognition Award was, you become a custodian of something and then you pass it on. And for example, she said that David Tennant took that very, very seriously. And I think, like a lot of people, when they say that, oh, Cravat's my favourite Doctor, I'm like, oh, right, and fan stuff. What's your favourite Doctor in the show? And they go, no, ever. And I'm like, what? Hang on a minute. There's the show. like people turn around and say to me that you are my favourite Doctor ever. And I'm like, I don't know. I never know how to react to that. It's one of those things where one of my friends has got 2 children, and they listen to the audios and see photos of me. They've seen, obviously, we did the live action stuff before, and they they love seeing all the fan doctors, to which obviously they're like, we want to be fan doctors when we grow up. And it's like, it is like a mini version of what we've just said there with Adventure in Space and Time. Like it's you've got to remember sometimes as well, because I like trying to push the boundary a little bit with Doctor Who. I like to try and sort of like stuff that the show would never do. I like not too dark. Don't get me wrong, never too dark, because you've got to remember that the young children will look it up and find it. But
yeah,
I try to skirt the line where, because what I loved about RTD was he did stuff in his era where I notice things now, but I didn't as a kid, like little jokes,
right,
like little things here and there that I didn't pick up on. But then you look at the dialogue and you're like, what do you mean he wrote that in? You're like,
yeah.
I'll probably tell you that after the call as well.
Sure.
But yeah, Doctor Who just expands to so many people, and I think fan content helped definitely, like including expanded media. Expanded media helps to keep the real, if you know when I say the real show, alive to the next part.
Yes.
You've got the BBC Doctor Who actors appearing in extended media via comic, audio, novelization, all sorts. But then you've got the fan stuff where your love for the show, you're seeing other people who also love it. And you see versions of the show as well. It's not the same show, but it's interesting because the show, I think they said that the show can be any genre.
Yes.
And that's what's great about it. Like, you've got you can have a gothic show, you can have I think we're doing a multiverse thing where another multiverse thing. I keep doing those, but where the Daleks are Teletubbies. They like the casings look like Teletubbies, and they're very happy creatures. But it's like, you can do that because the show is that mad.
Yes.
And it's just, I love the way that you can express yourself through that. Like, me putting on my school blazer and just saying I'm Doctor Who, and it was enough.
Yeah.
Like, I didn't have to get the sets, didn't have to do anything. Just have to have your imagination. And obviously nowadays, I think the bar's gone a bit higher on the fan films that I know of.
Yeah.
Which were the ones I was making, really, and a couple of my friends at the time, which I don't like, because at the beginning of the lockdown, again, you won't have seen it because it was on my Instagram, but Pete Adams, who plays the young Doctor, he and I have known each other since 2007, because he lives in, I found him on YouTube making fan films as well. And we've met up a couple of times. Well, we've met up quite a few times, actually, but I saw him the other day. And we decided to reprise the character just to kind of, do it a bit differently. And that's what the Young Doctor Chronicles was. It was adapting the original fan films, which I still think is probably one of the worst things I've made. Using the original audio from the 2008 film, where you can't hear a word that they're saying, but I've got new cast members filling in for when they would dress up with wigs and a moustache.
Oh,
and be other people. Yeah, and then I've just got new voice actors, and you can hear them, but you can't hear the Doctor and Companion because I've used the original audio. So silly. But yeah, when we brought that back, he found the footage on an old hard drive during the first lockdown of a hidden episode, what we thought was the last one he ever made, which was part 2 to a Trial of the Time Lord kind of inspired series.
Okay.
He found the 3rd episode on just a little hard drive, and it was dated from the back then, and he just edited it, and I watched it, and I put it on an Instagram story, and people were like, it doesn't look real. I'm like, does it have to? Like as a kid, it looks fantastic because you've just had the TARDIS land. You just get a shot of the street blank, stop recording, put the TARDIS in front of the camera, press record, and then you fade them together in the edit.
Yeah.
Like that, I love that. The creativity of old fan films, I love them. And I feel like the bar nowadays has been brought too high, where I've seen people who make Doctor Who fan films, but they stop as like they're kids, and they stop because nobody watches them, or they stop because they say it's not as good as this person. And I don't like the comparisons. Just do what you want.
Oh,
be you.
Comparisons are invidious, because it's you can be only you, but as long as you're being authentic to you, that's enough. You being generic, not you, Connor, but specifically, but you know what I mean. And I think the thing is that for me, it doesn't always matter whether people have got, I'm talking now maybe with live action. Sometimes the special effects for like regeneration or laser weaponry or spaceships might not be as good as someone who's got a really high budget for those sorts of things. But it's the story for me.
It's story
the
first.
Characters. Yeah, if the characters really are believable and the way they interact with each other, and if there's some sort of plot, that's enough. Sometimes people have this sounds awful, shouldn't be saying it on your channel because I don't want people hating on you, but saying, why did you let that man speak? But sometimes we're overindulged in because of production values being so high. That, as you were coming back to the point that you made about some of the first Doctor stuff, you know, and that film noir feel, and how they had to, with a lower budget, really capitalize on things of light and shadow and just visual presentation of how actors are reacting to what is happening in the scene. It draws you in. But if you've got too many things going on, because you can put like 1,000 Daleks out there, you know, because like a computer game, not that there's anything wrong with that, and there are instances where that may be, you know, amazing, and certainly all that glimpse of the time war that we had when, you know, with the fall of Arcadia, and it was like, oh my goodness, I want to see more of this, and, you know, thinking, oh my goodness, where's this going to go? And we just get enough to whet our appetite, and maybe sometimes less is more.
100%. Like, prime Doctor Who for me. I love the new era, but I think a lot of people have turned on Series 1 recently because of cast associated. But I still love it because it was not only make or break, but also they had nothing, and they made what they could with it. You know, it was very, I liked the sort of camp nature it returned to. Like, I found myself finding more parallels with the classic series in Series 1, and then Series 2, when, you know, the budget goes up, the new Doctor comes in, it completely changes and goes to what is New Who. It was like a transitional series for the fans, and Series 1 still has a soft spot for me because none of the soundtrack that they used ever came back for the next series.
Oh, that's interesting.
Like the music when the Dalek, in Dalek, when the Dalek, you know, levitates and uses the spheres to create that bubble and, you know, self-destruct.
Oh yes.
That music never heard again. There is an iteration of it which was used in Doomsday, but the chords are so different you'd never think they were the same thing.
That's interesting. I never even noticed that.
But there was, like, you know, there was one, I think School Reunion used it. There was, because they had the brief, like, riff of a school bell ringing in that because it was at a school, and they had that in Series 1 as well. But they made a whole new soundtrack for the series moving forward. And I love the Series 1 soundtrack, and that's why I used a lot of it when I started, because I used the music when Julia died. I used that music from when the Dalek, when the Dalek self-destruct. I used that music because it was just so powerful. But yeah, there's a lot of things that changed, and Doctor Who just is always changing, which is why it's always interesting. I think which is why fan content is able to thrive. Yes, because the show changes. It's never like, if you look at the show 10 years ago, that's the Series 7 Part 2 Series 7 Part 1 was 10 years ago.
Goodness me. Just forget how long ago these things were.
Yeah, I think it was on the 25th of September was the 10-year anniversary of Amy and Rory leaving. And
goodness me.
Yeah. And and it's one of those things where you look at the show then, though, and you don't really think about it until you watch again. You realise how different it is, but also still the same. That's what's great about it. It's still got a blue box at land. It's still got the Doctor tinkering away with the TARDIS, or having I always think of like Town Called Mercy when he had a rough patch, we'll say. But every Doctor has, like, there's different elements, and it's always fun.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I think one of the reasons why someone can say to you quite earnestly that you're their favorite Doctor is because there's something in the characterization, something in the portrayal, something in the way they respond or react to the problems around them that sort of ties into maybe something within themselves.
Yeah.
So, so they resonate with it, if put it in those terms. And I think that's it, I mean, I can't for the life of me remember her name. There's a, Velocity.
Yes. Crystal.
Yeah. Crystal. How could I have forgotten her name? It must be the time of night that we're recording this, and we've both had very busy days, what with one thing and another. So I apologize for that. Of course, no Crystal. I mean, that was, her live action one. That was that first one she did, which was a post-regeneration adventure just to establish her. I mean, that was, I really enjoyed that. And it was, I don't know how to describe it. I was sort of, I don't know what I was expecting, because they changed the Daleks slightly and changed Davros a bit, and it was like, oh, so is this meant to be another universe?
Yeah.
Or, because then my old canon sort of thing was creeping into my brain again.
I think you and I have the same thing where we're always watching it.
Yeah.
Fit.
But then I say to myself,
you do see Capaldi's eyes.
Yes.
So it's after Capaldi, but it's like a different 13th Doctor in a way.
Yeah, yeah.
But it's also so different because the universe that it's set in is so unique. You're like, so that was also Capaldi's universe. It wasn't just a shift from Moffat to this suddenly. This is a definite new version. Yeah. I like that. I like the way you kind of you end up thinking about, like you said, you think, so Capaldi lived in this universe as well. I wonder what that was like, and I wonder if he was any different because of it.
Yes.
I mean, he was still glaring into camera when the regeneration happened, but nonetheless, it's interesting to think of because you got to think about there's an established Doctor, but living in this world of kind of like neon lights and very kind of retro vibes. Yeah. And it's just really interesting to think about.
And then there's another element to it where you think, does it really matter? I'm enjoying this. This is brilliant. I want to watch more and hear more to the audios. So, sometimes we don't need, sometimes we can be completists, serial completists, and we want to know how it all fits together. And, there are other days when it doesn't matter to us. And that's fine as well. I think Russell T. Davies did say at one point, he said, I want fans to think around Doctor Who and create stuff and, have their own stories and try and work out what happens next or what happened before. I think it was in an interview he did some years ago when he was still the showrunner. And I thought it almost was trying to say that we all, well, maybe not legally, but emotionally, we are all stakeholders in the show. And so our feelings about it, our thoughts about it, and how we might engage with it, it's all valid. It's all valid. Because it's keeping the thing alive.
That's something nowadays. I feel like Doctor Who lost recently. I'm not going to get too much into it because we'll end up long debates and we'll end up. We're already an hour and a quarter into this.
Are we really? I thought we were only doing 20 minutes. That's my fault. I apologise for that.
No, it's all good. I've been letting you talk. It's like 10:30. No, we've done it. But it's like there was something that Stephen Moffat said in his final interview with Crystal D, where he said, "You can try and you'll fail, but you can't ignore the fans." And he described a scenario where you can't be stood above like Noah with the 10 Commandments and telling them, this is Doctor Who now. You have to sit around a campfire and you share stories about what the Doctor means to you, and you have to engross yourself with the fans. And Russell's never left that, really. He's always talked to fans and always loved them. But I always found with the more recent era, whilst I still have a soft spot for the recent era, I didn't really see any fan interaction.
Right.
It always felt very much like people were crying out for something else, and then it wouldn't happen. And you're like,
Yeah.
and I'm not trying to claim that fans have an ownership over the show, because ultimately, like, the showrunner can do what they like, but I feel like you have to sort of, the fans will make this work for you. Like, an example would be recently Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, who's doing that new DC film Black Adam.
Oh yes, yes.
He's been saying in a lot of interviews, he's basically spoiled an ending where a character returns, but it's good marketing, because he's come around gone, we've listened to the fans and what they want, and then he says this statement, and every fan knows exactly what it means.
Oh,
and
right.
Now Black Adam's coming out in 6 days. Everyone's talking about it. Everyone's going to go and see it to see if it happens. In fact, Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson has confirmed it will happen. So everyone's, you know what I mean, it box office hit, and it's the fans who will do it for them.
Good strategy.
I think that's why with the 60th, when you look at the people who are returning for it, it's not just nostalgia. I think it's just clever. And a lot of people complained that the new Doctor Shooty got announced over social media. I don't think so. I don't think that's bad, because they posted it for free, and then it went viral, and then the news wanted to talk about it. You didn't have to pay them to talk about it, and they were going to an event later that evening, and that's all anyone wanted to talk about. Free marketing. Yeah. You just post it on social media, it goes viral, and you get free marketing. And I think that's what's really clever, is that he's talking directly to the fans, and the fans spread it for him.
Yeah.
And I think that's what I'm looking forward to with how these further announcements go. And obviously, when there's been some posts on Instagram of Shooty Gatwa doing a photo shoot for the brand called Dior, I think.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh,
but
okay.
what he's wearing looks fantastic, but everyone's like, doctor's costume, because the day before there was a selfie with Russell, Shooty. He's there too, and everyone's like, oh, what are they planning? And then the next day, Shooty's putting on clothes, and it looks great. And everyone's like, they saw them the other day, and it's just, you've got the madness of fans, which will create conspiracy theory, thus creating traction. And I think that's just very clever. And he's doing it really early. His episode's not for another 13 months.
Is it not? Goodness me.
BBC confirmed earlier today that there's no Christmas special or New Year special. So we've got the centenary in about a week now. And then it looks like we're not going to hear anything until the 60th. We'll probably see more stuff. We'll probably get teasers released. I have a feeling that there'll be a teaser on Christmas Day. Just a little Christmassy thing.
There needs to be something.
Yeah, because nowadays, leaving it until a fortnight before, I'm not a fan.
No.
I loved it as a kid when Parting of the Ways came out, and you had a new trailer counting down the days every day. And I watched TV to wait for it. And it would come, and it was only 30 seconds. And I was just like bouncing off the walls. And I loved it. But that's the thing, you need, like, your main audience. It's also a lot of people, I think, say it's a children's show. I think it's a family show, but you need children on board with it to have the next generation of fans. Like I don't want to say this like too rudely, but we were the demographic. We still love the show and what it's about. We continue to talk about it, make it more relevant. But ultimately, if we're not around one day, the show doesn't exist. So I was a real Moffat hater when I was younger. Russell was like God to me, and I hated everything that Moffat did. I was a proper hater. Like if you see all those haters online for Chibnall, I was like that, but for Moffat.
Oh, really?
And I regret that, because I now look at the Moffat era completely, and I was just impatient because Russell and Moffat are different. They show a whole story. Like Russell would show a whole story in an episode, but have little breadcrumbs that they'd go and they'd mention, going, we'll figure that out later. But Moffat would be someone who leaves the breadcrumbs and leaves it on a suspenseful note for the next episode, so there wouldn't be a mention of it again. And I really hated that, because I was going through my later teenage years and just feeling rebellious for some reason. But I've got a more soft spot for the Moffat era now, because ultimately he got us through the 50th, got us Capaldi, and got the show still continuing on, So I don't think it's possible to completely hate something because in the show's run, because ultimately it worked.
Yeah.
Like, it just wasn't for you. That's it.
Exactly. Really. Yeah. I mean, River I mean, we got River, and that was due to him writing, wasn't it?
Yeah, he wrote
After all,
Silence in the Library and Forest.
and then the Weeping Angels. I mean, for those two things alone, applause. Even if people didn't like him then as a showrunner, we had those things,
exactly,
those elements. Which I've got how many box sets? I've been getting the audios of River Song's diaries as well. So they're quite good. Well, not they're quite good. They're excellent. But
My general view is just I don't think he was a great showrunner, but I don't think there's an episode I don't hate any episode. It's just I wasn't a fan of the direction of it. And that's my kind of more view on it now, rather than just going, I hate this. Why would you write it's introducing John Hurt as the Doctor? That's not his real name. I was that petty.
Oh, really?
I was awful. I was so bad, and I really regret that. I never went online and shouted about it, but I talked amongst my friends who felt the same way, and I did sort of go off Doctor. I only watched Last Christmas, January this year.
Really?
Yeah, oh, wow. I skipped it. I skipped it because I really didn't like Death in Heaven. And then eventually, when Series 9 came along later that year, it'd been enough time where I said, I'm not going to watch it as a fan, but I feel wrong missing it. And I didn't watch Last Christmas till then. And I just turned to Dan and went, did you know, Dan, that technically every Christmas is Last Christmas? And he looked at me and went, you've watched this, haven't you? And I said, no. And he goes, that's the saying for this episode. And I just smiled and went, yeah, well, it's like, I think I've learned a lot through the Moffat era. And I certainly feel like I've learned a lot through a bit about writing as a result of the Moffat era.
Yeah.
Like there are certain Moffatisms that I do actually adopt. Like I like characters that are out of order. I think that's really fascinating to play with.
Yes.
I just found myself confused when they would decide, instead of going backwards, that they'd go straight to the beginning and then go forwards again. I was like, wait, what? I was like, okay, so what direction? Like that but that was just, I sorted that out in the end. Quite simple when you look at it. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, they have a sense of what they're trying to do. And I suppose they're trying to refresh the show to say, we could do this with it in a positive light. But unfortunately, even though it's a show that has become about renewal, but I mean, as we're told in An Adventure in Space and Time, that it was meant to be an educational show trying to help understand history in some, with no bug-eyed monsters, as Sidney Newman was saying. But it was to try and create a window into history and how would people from the late 20th century interact or understand if they were placed in this other context. So but then very early on, the show morphed into something else, and then Dalek Mania swept the world, and the rest, as I say, is history. And so, without that, would the show have petered out? We've got no way of knowing. In an alternate universe where maybe Terry Nation and all that and the Daleks didn't appear, who knows? Maybe Doctor Who finished after a couple of series. Let's not think about that alternate universe.
Yeah. Indeed, yeah. But that's what I quite like about the Chibnall era. I love every historical they've done. Like a lot of people found it, or a lot of people I saw on Twitter at least found it like they were being talked at. But I thought, well, I didn't know she got a Nobel Peace Prize. Like it's not like. It's not that it's not something I wouldn't be interested in, but it's not something you think about randomly in the day. So I was like, oh, it's good to learn this stuff. And, ultimately, you wrote a character like Ryan.
Yeah.
Who doesn't know anything about it. He never learned it. So thus, he's the one to focus on. He's the one who goes and meets Malcolm X and Rosa and, Martin Luther King. He meets them and knows their names. It's like, oh, my God. And that's what's great about it. And my favorite one is Demons of the Punjab.
Yes, that's a very good one.
I'm such a sucker for Doctor Who episodes that don't end with everything happy. And
okay.
like the way it ends, it's accurate. But it like ultimately you knew that from being in the future that there were characters who were going to survive, but there wasn't any chance of going, yes, we'll find your old or original husband and reunite you or anything. No, it's real that this is what happened. Like and it really shows a volume of like the actual event, like the partition of India. And a lot of people again complained about it. I love the fact that England's the enemy. Without getting too political about it, we are usually.
Well, this is colonization and imperialism.
That's why
it devastates cultures.
Well, that's what inspired me when I did the Dalek Federation volume to do Tyrone's War in Ireland. So that Julia Breslin goes there and she's familiar with it, but now she's from the 43rd century, now in the 17th, and seeing this, and the Doctor gets thrown in a barn and nearly shot with a shotgun. Like that's I made sure very, like, because I know it's obviously a huge part of history, and obviously where I'm from is very much associated with it. They are the aggressors. I spoke to Dan, I spoke to Anya, I spoke to Julia, Chelsea. I spoke to everyone I knew who was Irish about it, and I wrote a script. Dan gave some notes, everyone gave notes, and in the end we came out with that. And I just like pushing that. I like pushing the boundary of storytelling and actually going, no, like, we got to learn from our mistakes, and I think that's what's important too.
Yes.
If you ignore the past or forget the past, you're condemned to repeat it.
Yes. And
that's what I think that's what I quite like about the historicals, especially with Chibnall's, where he just blatantly was saying, yeah, we did that.
Yes.
It makes you think, and I felt like myself not having actually done it. There's a lot of, like, I had a new light when, like, for example, when researching Tyrone's War, I had a lot more understanding for what Dan, Anya, and Chelsea were talking about. Like recently, they've been thinking about doing a story with Michael Collins, which is to do with the Troubles directly.
Oh, wow, goodness, yeah.
They want to do it live action for series 2, but they just don't. It's too big scale for what they want to do. And I've said, of course, let's do it in audio, like, But I made it very clear to them that I said, you all need to write it though. I'm not that I don't want to be a part of it, but I want it to be authentic. I want it to be something that's true for you.
Yes.
And I think it's important to tell those stories. Like, are you familiar with TT Productions?
I'm not sure. I think probably.
Yeah, Chelsea's done a couple of audios with Abby Louise before, and they recently did one about the R101.
Yes. Sorry. I don't always notice the channel names. Sometimes I'm looking for specific adventures or specific people, and then I think, that person's done this, and then I follow a link, and then
Yeah, I put it. I think it was in the last podcast I mentioned it because Chelsea directed it. Like she's gone into way more of the audio realm as well.
That was it. Yes.
But yeah, it's like the way that I listened to that, and you get very emotional because obviously it has to feel real, but also the performances, because basically almost everyone I knew was in it. So there was Dominic G. Martin, George Guidra, Aidan O'Connor. I don't think Eamon's from New Zealand, so he wasn't in it. But like me and Abby hadn't really kind of got acquainted by then, and I think I'm going to be in a couple of them now for TT Productions. But yeah, it was great, and she's got more and more into that and telling those more historically accurate stories. Yeah, I really like it. I just thought I'd plug it as well. But yeah. Well, thank you very much, Michael, for making yourself free.
No, thank you, Connor. After a very busy day, I'm almost like I'm always channeling the First Doctor with his Billy's fluffs and things.
Yeah.
How dare you, young man? How dare you?
Oh God, this is going to make me.
Oh dear.
Well,